um, Google loves me. So I say to people,
That's why then.
yeah.
That's
So
why.
now with YouTube loves me more, but I've been on other people's things and I actually describe myself like this. So I say to people, so I don't have a website. I'm like Ryan Reynolds, right? But of the sales world, right? See, Ryan Reynolds is a super famous movie star. In fact, in my opinion, the greatest movie star ever. And you watch as he comes up higher than Brad Pitt over time and everyone else. And the reason being, his work ethic is greater than anybody else's. This guy, since the 90s that I've tracked, has been, he never seems to say no to anything. He puts his hand up to do movies and TV shows, and someone says, "Can you be on this interview? Can you do this talk show? Can you be part of like a game show? Can you be the game show host?" He doesn't say no to anything. And since the 90s, he's been in TV shows pretty much every single year since the 90s. He's also done at least 1 to 3 movies every year since the 90s. He has done movies on every genre that there is. Even Brad Pitt hasn't done, say, horror or R-rated stuff, and yet and R-rated could be like hugely violent, or it could be, gross, or, whatever sort, profane. It could be any sort. And he's done every genre. There's nothing that he can't do. He's an action hero. He's been action hero for DC and for Marvel. Nobody else gets to claim that. And love stories. There's nothing he can't do. And not only that, is he turns up to every interview. If somebody's been asked to go to an interview, let's say on Saturday Night Live or whatever it is, whatever shows it is, used to be Conan O'Brien or whatever it was, the Late Show, and they don't turn up, they'd call Ryan Reynolds. He'll just turn up. He'll turn up to everything. And yet he's married with a wife and 3 daughters, maybe 4 now. I think it's 3 or 4 daughters. He loves them. He talks about them all the time. He sees them all the time. They love him. He's never without going to his family. He doesn't go off, like he does all this stuff. He's super famous, and yet he spends time with his family. There's no chance of that family falling apart because he's always with them, even though he goes to work, does these other things. So I've just gone, wow, you're amazing. Now, interestingly, he doesn't have a website. So for all this stuff that he does, he doesn't have a website. And yet if you write Ryan Reynolds into Google, Google knows exactly who Ryan Reynolds is. So Google has compiled all this cool stuff about Ryan Reynolds because Ryan Reynolds shows up at stuff all the time, which means interviews get shown up from other people's channels, TV shows, movies, articles, all sorts of things show up from other people's channels. And as a result, Google knows exactly who Ryan Reynolds is. You put it in and he's the top, right? And it compiles all this stuff. I've become the same. I don't have a website. And over time of just showing up, continually showing up in my field of sales training, business networking, is you can write Misty Henkel, I'll show up. Misty Henkel sales training, I'll show up. Misty Henkel networking, I'm there. So as a result, Google thinks I'm as famous as Ryan Reynolds. So I must be as famous as Ryan Reynolds because I show up the same way as Ryan Reynolds with all this cool stuff and photos and stuff from other people's interviews, and I get to advertise everybody else's channels, and as a result Google loves me for it, and so keeps putting stuff up for me. So yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah. So there's ways around things, but yeah, that's it. I get to say I'm famous like Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds and I are exactly the same. Except I know who he is, and I'm sure he knows who I am. He just doesn't mention me in interviews. Yes.
Yeah.
But that will happen.